Good afternoon, one and all. I am Dr. Vinuta P. Kunderi, Department of Studies and Research in English, KSOU. Today, I'll be discussing Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice novel that is prescribed for your syllabus. Jane Austen is one of the most important novelists of 19th century. She is also considered as domestic novelist. She wrote about characters that are known to her in her real life. As a child, she was brilliant because her own father was teaching her. From young age, she was an independent thinker. Henceforth, she decides that she will not marry for only sake of getting marriage, and she believes that out of love there is no scope for marriage. Henry Austen, brother of Jane Austen, comments on the personality of Jane Austen. I quote, "Her stature was of true elegance, her complexion was of finest texture. It might with truth be said that her eloquence blood spoke through her modest cheeks. Her voice was extremely sweet. She believed herself with fluency and precision." I unquote. Austen started writing at a very young age of 16, and she was a perfectionist. She writes about her theme and publish it little later. She does not publish it immediately, and she was in a habit of maturing it and correcting it quite often. Hence, she took 27 years to complete her 6 novels. After finishing each of the novels, she constantly revises them and then spare many more months to rewrite before publication. Hence, her version of all her novels are perfect and neatly knitted within, amongst the story and the characters. The 6 important novels of hers, such as Sense and Sensibility, published in 1811, second novel Pride and Prejudice, that will be discussed here today, was published in 1813, Mansfield Park 1813, Emma 1815, Northanger Abbey 1817, and her last novel Persuasion was published in 1817 as well. Even after 200 years, Jane Austen novels are read worldwide. You must understand the reason behind it, because Jane Austen as a novelist is attracted to the characters and dialogues from real world of the time, as I mentioned earlier. She represents the society in the form of social group which is formed to resolve the matrimonial complexities. As you observe, apart from Pride and Prejudice, the novels such as Sense and Sensibility and Emma, you can see that the marriage, the concept of marriage revolves the entire novel. And even in Emma, the character Emma herself becomes a matchmaker, and she thinks that she has that craft of matchmaking. Henceforth, the storylines goes as such. In the advancement of the plot, as the misunderstanding and frustration increases, the audience's curiosity also intensifies in the same proportions. Jane Austen is good in her craft because she holds back the interest within the story and between the characters. As the story develops, she tries to unravel the curiosity, unravel the scenes behind it, reasons behind it. The presentation of the society in the form of parties shopping and dances in the full humor and irony, because she is ironically depicting the society, the pretentious society, the society that has its own prejudices to be presenting as a good humanity or good family to maintain the stature in the society of higher classes. Jane Austen, in short, is represented as the writer of the 19th century because she is more of Pope rather than Wordsworth. Even though the era she belongs to falls between 18th and 19th century, her way of writing majorly sticks to the 19th century novels. Jane Austen has a specific way of writing her novels, and two major observations you must keep in mind while reading Jane Austen are: the first specific reason is Austen is concerned in the depiction of her own sex, that is, female. All her novels goes around the female characters. In her novel, female characters become the protagonist and the rest of the characters go around them. For example, Pride and Prejudice, this novel protagonist is Elizabeth Bennet, where the other characters go around her and she plays an important role in the development of the rest of the characters. And the second important reason that is referring to Jane Austen novels as the best is that the absence of characters from humble life, which I mean to say that Jane Austen always concentrates on aristocratic society, higher class or upper middle classes. All her family representations, all her characters are living in a social stature. So she depicts the upper class society or higher middle class society. And the other important observation is that no novel represents or discusses the low class or destitutes, because that is not her interest. Jane is attracted by the naturalness and reality in speech and behavior of the persons of her age. The man's thinking, speak and the action as a real human being is represented in her novel. To speak, indeed, Pride and Prejudice is one such novel written based on her observation of the society or the classes that she has encountered all her life. Pride and Prejudice, as I said earlier, is a novel of romance. It is also considered as social comedy. Pride and Prejudice portray England of 19th century. This novel opens with a quote, I quote, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." So all the classes in the society, upper class especially, as they have acquired possession from their ancestors, the only point that they have to lead in their life is that they have to find a suitable partner, because love is the important essence of marriage, as said by Jane Austen in her 19th century novels. And moreover, 19th century is an era having an expectation and of reputation. Reputation stands at the peak of all the families or the society as well. So Pride and Prejudice is a love story of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, and how they overcome their differences towards each other and end up getting married. From the beginning of the novel, you can see these two individuals get into troubles and they had their own prides and they have their own prejudices to that is overcome at the end of the novel. Both characters through this novel learn to unlearn their pride and prejudice so that they can come together for their goodness amongst each other. The story follows the Bennet's family. At the opening, you can see the Bennet's family, where Mrs. Bennet is so anxious to get marrying her 5 daughters, such as Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Catherine, and Lydia. Jane, she wanted to marry all her 5 daughters to the wealthiest person, eligible bachelors, because their house, the place they are living, is inherited. It will be inherited by William Colin after the death of Mr. Bennet. William Colin is a distant cousin of Mr. Bennet, and he is a clergyman. As the novel proceeds, initially you see there is a ball party happening in nearby town of Maryton. There, Charles Bingley, who is a rich and he had come to bachelor, he had come to Northampton estate in purchasing it. He has taken rent of that place. Later, he had an idea of purchasing it. Mrs. Bennet, who knew about Charles Bingley, she wanted to, she made sure that he likes one of her daughters and get married to them. She had that idea. With this intention, they attended the ball party. There, at the very outset, Charles Bingley gets attracted to the eldest daughter of Bennet's, that is Jane. She is beautiful and shy. In the party, she meets Elizabeth, the second daughter of Bennet. She meets Darcy and they exchanged a conversation. At the initial meeting, they both like each other, but they failed to express love for each other because Darcy was filled with pride. He believes that he belongs to the higher social class, and he has preserved himself. He has reserved himself to be such. And even Elizabeth, she had liking for higher social class men, but she failed to approach towards Darcy, and she keeps herself calm and composed. Though Elizabeth likes people who belong to high social class, she dislikes Darcy in particular because of his arrogant nature, as she overheard Darcy speaking to Charles Bingley that Elizabeth is not of that beautiful. She has an average looks. So Elizabeth, after hearing these words, she had her own prejudices against Darcy. She thinks that Darcy is behaving in such a manner because he thinks she is not of higher class and she doesn't have any social status as that of Darcy. Knowing so little about him, Elizabeth makes a snap judgment about him that he is not a good guy, which prohibits her from going near Darcy. Later in the story, Elizabeth encounters the charming George Wickham, a military officer. There is a mutual attraction between Elizabeth and George Wickham. Later, this relationship was disturbed by Darcy. This incident also brought in bad impression about Darcy to Elizabeth, and her disliking towards Darcy is getting higher in many other cases. The second most important reason for Elizabeth for not liking Darcy is because she got to know that he was the person behind Charles Bingley rejecting her sister's love, that is Jane's love affair. He Darcy thinks that Jane doesn't like his friend Charles Bingley. Henceforth, he became the reason for not approving the love relation between Charles Bingley and Jane Bennet. Darcy Elizabeth did not make any efforts to know the reason behind Darcy's action, and influenced by her prejudice continued to dislike Darcy. However, Darcy's interest in Elizabeth started growing because he got to know that Elizabeth has a fine personality and she is intelligent, lively and strong woman. After some days, Elizabeth's friend Charlotte threw a party where Darcy was also invited. Seeing Elizabeth again, Darcy took courage to propose her in marriage. He tries to express his love and he wanted to marry her. Surprisingly, his proposal was dismissed by Elizabeth because she had her own prejudices against Darcy, thinking that he is an arrogant man, and he got confused about it. Darcy gets disturbed by her refusal and demands an explanation. Darcy was disheartened. Henceforth, he asked for an explanation for rejecting his love for her. Then Elizabeth explains that she has overheard their conversation, Charles Bingley's conversation as well as Darcy's conversation, and Darcy accepts his true conversation. That was not liked. They exchanged the thoughts. She also held him responsible for the separation between Charles and Jane's relationship. Later, Darcy explains Elizabeth through a letter. The conversation between them happened through a letter. And he states the reason why he disapproved Charles Bingley's and Jane relationship. And the other factor, the second important factor that became the reason for their dislike is Elizabeth's relationship with George Wickham. And Darcy in that letter has mentioned that George Wickham is a person of no responsibility and he has lost all his money, and he also had an intention of getting married to Darcy's 15-year-old sister, that is Georgiana Darcy. She is quite teenage girl, and he had an intention of getting in marriage with Georgiana Darcy to take away all her money and property. Darcy, who knew the truth, he disapproved their marriage as well as love. When this truth is revealed to Elizabeth, she understood, she tried to understand the true nature of Darcy's. With this revelation, Elizabeth's perspective towards Darcy for being an arrogant man changed. Shortly thereafter, there is an incident happened in the family of Bennet's sister. The younger sister of Bennet's, that is Lydia, she ran away with George Wickham. This news spread like a wildfire in the family of Bennet's. Their reputation was at stake. Darcy, who knew that Lydia has eloped with George Wickham, he also got the news that they have not married and they are in living together relationship. Hence, he gave huge amount of money to George Wickham to get married to Lydia, and he was the person who saved the family reputation of Bennet's. This brought in much respect and love in the heart of Elizabeth towards Darcy. Elizabeth shared the news with Darcy, who secretly offered Wickham lots of money to marry Lydia. Later, Elizabeth finds out that Darcy's good actions have saved her family's reputation. She also finds out that Darcy is the person behind the rearrangement of Charles and Jane. Finally, Darcy proposes again to Elizabeth, who, after seeing all his good deeds and actions, accepts the proposal at last. The novel ends on a happy note. So, the primary lesson of Pride and Prejudice is not to be too prideful and judgmental towards others. When we look at, this is how the novel ends. When we look at what are the important questions that might be asked in examination, is that usually in this novel the characters are being questioned, the questions will be related to the characters, love relationship between Charles Bingley and Jane, Darcy and Elizabeth relationship, characters Mr. Bennet, George Wickham will be usually asked, and two important themes related to the novel is quite oftenly asked in the examination: the theme of marriage and the element of Pride and Prejudice that runs in the story of Pride and Prejudice. And even some of the characters are asked in short notes, that is importance of ball. In the novel, just now I discussed, you have come across two ball parties. Ball party has a significance in the novel of Jane Austen's, because these parties are organized amongst the families, because with an intention of exchanging people's interest, exchange of love, exchange of reputation. Any rich family, they arrange for a party, they throw a party with an intention of exchanging their richness, showing off their aristocratic status to the other families or society ahead. So this ball party brought in Charles Bingley in contact with Bennet's family, and the same party in the second appearance, it brought in beautiful love relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy. So coming across these, keeping in mind these situations, you will understand what is the importance of the role of ball party in Pride and Prejudice. Lydia, the character of Lydia, the character of George Wickham, and the character of Mrs. Bennet is quite oftenly asked in the examination. So be prepared for all these important questions. These are quite oftenly asked questions. Hopefully, I have made you understand the storyline of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. All the very best for your examination. Thank you.
ವಿಷಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಕ್ಲಿಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಪರೀಕ್ಷೆಯ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾಹಿತಿ, ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರವೇಶದ ಮೇಲೆ ಕ್ಲಿಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರವೇಶದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾಹಿತಿಯನ್ನು